What I'd like to do first is to thank Brad Thompson and Epstein Becker Green because they very generously agreed to sponsor this morning's breakfast, and that's why we are very happy. We have not had to charge anybody for any of our breakfast because of the generous sponsorship of many, many companies and organizations. And I do want to mention, because we are disruptive, it is our 2-year birthday this week, and so we do have a birthday cake because I think there's nothing better to start the morning with your coffee than a piece of really sweet, delicious cake. So don't be shy, go for it, and enjoy. And with that, I'm going to ask Regina to come on up.
My name is Regina Holiday, and I was a regular person. Mother of 2 wonderful children, the oldest, which is on the autism spectrum. He has high-functioning autism. And that was my life. I got married back in 1993 to a wonderful man, and his name was Frederick Allen Holiday. And when he finally got hired by American University in September of 2008, we were so excited because finally we could afford an insurance policy for the whole family. It was only $362 a month. We could do that. And it was just great. And he went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed him with hypertension. And then in January, he was complaining of chest pain, that his ribs hurt. And then in March, the pain became excruciating. He could no longer carry his books to work. He actually had to use my son's rolling backpack to take his books to teach class. And the doctor said, "By any chance is your husband depressed?" I'm like, yes, he is incredibly depressed because my husband is in excruciating pain all the time. She calls me up and says, "We have scheduled you an appointment with an oncologist tomorrow at a local hospital. We think you need some additional tests." You know, I didn't really even know what an oncologist was. I had to go on the internet to find out. The next day, I took my husband, we went to the hospital, and he hurt so bad. So I went back to work. And 2 days later, I get a phone call at the toy store where I work. I was helping somebody buy a toy for a birthday. And it's my husband on the phone. And he says, "Regina, the doctor was just in my room. And he says I have tumors and growths. And I don't really know what's going on, so could you please come here as soon as you possibly can?" But by the time I got there, his oncologist had left town for a medical conference and was not available for questions. So for the next 4 days, I went around the hospital trying to find out exactly what my husband had, where was it, what was the level of disease, what was prognosis. And every night I went to the internet, and the internet helped me answer questions. And then the doctor left, and we cried. And that's when my husband turned to me and said, "You go after them. You try to do everything you can do to get me care." When I got to the new facility, we were sent with an out-of-date and incomplete medical record and summary. Because they had no idea what level of pain meds he was on or what was in his system, they were unable to provide him care for the next 6 hours as they tried to create a medical record using a phone and a fax machine. Every night when I would try to sleep, I would get on the internet. I was researching renal cell carcinoma. I was trying to teach myself everything I could about my husband's level of disease when I wasn't taking care of him. And I was sleeping about 2 hours a night. I ran into a friend named Christine Kraft. She told me I needed to get on this new thing called Twitter and find a guy named ePatient Dave who was a survivor of stage 4 kidney cancer. And in one night, I was on in communication, and the next day I was talking to Dave's oncologist in Boston, all because of Twitter. Facebook, and PHR with privacy issues. Well, I basically data mined my husband's Facebook entries back 7 months and found out during his status lines he had actually admitted to 5 of the symptoms of kidney cancer as part of his Facebook entries. Could you imagine a data mining app that could pull that kind of information out and help patients and point out the fact that maybe they need to go see a doctor? I also used Facebook as a caring bridge. When my husband was ill, I didn't know any way to communicate with as many people as possible in a very, very rapid amount of time. And I thought, hey, Facebook. I told every single person I know, friend me. And then on June 17th, the actual day we started healthcare farm debates, My husband was having trouble breathing. He had blood clots in both legs. His lungs were slowly filling with fluid. And around 11 o'clock in the morning that he died. I decided to email every single person I knew about the fact that I was going to fight to change health in this country, that I was going to fight to make sure that medicine was better and that patients got rights, and put up a mural in a local store because I'm an artist. And I thought, what is a way to get the information out there as fast as possible? So I was going to be placing a large series of murals, a really big one that would talk about everything that we had experienced in our horrible situation. When my husband was sick, I used every internet item at my disposal to try to help him. I Facebooked, I tweeted, I created a blog, everything I could to provide him care. But my question was, what are you doing with meaningful use in high tech to make sure patients have access to that medical record? Because we cannot do it without that information. We can have all these amazing social media devices, but if we cannot access the information, we can create no change. So I made a painting called 73 cents, because that's how much you pay per page for your medical record in the state of Maryland. CNN, BBC, got the cover of the BMJ in September. This was a firestorm of information about why we need this access so very desperately. If we utilize these technologies, we have an amazing amount to communicate with each other as individuals. But also, if we have access to information within a medical record, then think of what we can do for patients, the individual patient in their life, but also what we can do with aggregation of data. So that's what I'm asking you today, is where do we go from here? And I want you to think about how you can utilize social media, how you can utilize your network of friends to make sure that people know patients need to be taken care of, that we need to have access and rights to our own information. And that's the most important thing. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Aldous Berzins. I'm from the Special Olympics. I'm the director, or I'm a former director of IT there. And of these volunteers, there are 400 doctors. This is the crossover now into the personal health record realm. As the athletes are sporting, at the same time over these 10 days, there'll be 400 doctors that fly in for free and provide medical screenings in 6 different disciplines. In the Shanghai World Games, there were 7,500 athletes. About 3/4 of them came, about 4,000 came to the Healthy Athlete venue and were screened. And this generated, they saw about 4 of those disciplines, so this generated about 18,000 paper forms that we had the data enter in the course of 10 days. So this is our data we've been collecting since 2003 in the Healthy Athlete programs. And what do we do about all these bad indicators? So what we did was I went to some of Dr. Blumenthal's conferences here, the national coordinator. Similar to Regina, I just went to these conferences and sat at tables and was asking people questions about the personal health record, because I think what we needed to do was empower the athlete to be in control of their medical data. I was tasked to go find out about this, and I really thought that the right way to go about this is to collect all the healthy athlete related or the Special Olympics related health information, get it all into one personal medical record that's kind of symbolized by this credit card size personal health record. And the point I want to make here is that we're trying to take care of the Special Olympics health house, sort of, get all that data together that we control into this card, so that we're ready to shake hands whenever Obama or the electronic medical record systems become available to integrate with the hospital systems. But we'll be ready, or we hope to be.
We saved the most exciting topic for last, government regulation. 2 questions are, can the government, in particular the FDA, regulate this area of connected health? We just heard all about connected health. Can the government regulate it? That's can, and then number 2, should they? It is a serious question. It's serious because FDA looked at electronic medical records earlier this year, and without digging very deeply found that there were 7 deaths associated with electronic medical records. So FDA said we can regulate this, and so the first thing I want to do is analyze whether they're right in that regard, and I happen to agree with them. The key definition for a medical device, which is the scope of FDA regulation, has two parts to it. Number one, it has to be a physical thing, and number two, it has to be intended for use in medicine. So the most interesting questions revolve around the second question, which is it intended for medical use? Basically, what you do is you decide the intent of the person who's selling the product. And how do you decide the intent? That's a classic legal problem. How do you know the person intended to commit murder? So we've organized a coalition to try and bring some clarity to what the proper scope of FDA regulation is in this space so that folks know and can develop technology with an eye toward whether or not they need to comply. And there are three basic areas where we're trying to help bring that clarity. The first is intended use. And I just went through what that means. But there's a more difficult question beyond just ascertaining what someone's intended use is, and that is figuring out which intended uses qualify for FDA regulation. The FDA's been around for a long time. It has its origins back in 1907. It's over 100 years old in some ways, all right? A lot of the statutes were written back in the 30s. And at that time, life was simpler. A person's weight, whether they smoke, whether they sleep enough, whether they get enough exercise. That was just the way you live your life, and you know. And then there was disease over here, and there wasn't a connection between the two. Well, now we know more, and so a lot of people want to say, you know, here's a tool for help you managing your weight. With a cell phone app, you can keep track of all your caloric intake, your exercise, and all that sort of stuff, and it can give you real-time feedback into how you're doing. All right? A lot of the people who market it then want to go the next step further, and it's only logical to say, if you're a diabetic, this thing can really help you manage your disease. Well, if you say that, you just crossed the line. And now FDA wants to regulate you. The second issue is the accessory rule, and that is, in the old days, things were simple. Very little medical technology in a hospital or any place else was connected. And so when it was connected, it was logical to regulate them in the same way. So you had an ultrasound machine, and you had a little probe that gets put against your abdomen, right? And you plug it in. Well, you regulate the two the same, because if this thing fails, the whole thing's going to fail, right? Well, now you take your medical device, you take your blood glucose meter, and you connect it to your phone. The phone connects to a cell tower and connects to a doctor in some remote passive database, and the whole thing is connected. Does that mean the whole thing is regulated by FDA? So we got to figure that one out as well. The last one is software, and you all probably know much more about software than I do. But there's this continuum of software, all the way from the software that literally drives the medical technology, resides on the medical technology, to that which might be middleware, that might be decision support software, to the electronic medical record. Which of those categories are regulated? FDA has never said. To their credit, initially, back 15 years ago, they said, we're not going to get into giving guidance in this area because it's changing too fast. If we said something today, it would be outdated a year from now. Okay, I get that. But at some point, that's got to stop, and at some point, they got to, step out and say, well, what's regulated and what's not? Because everyone is flying blind, and it has tremendous implications. So that's a final area. And this is my pitch for involvement and advocacy. The government doesn't always get it right. They will pick a level of regulation which makes sense to them, and they're all good and well-meaning people. But as you all know better than anybody, they need to hear from the real world, too, about what the concerns are and where that optimal balance is. And so I would encourage you all to do that.